Boxing fans, this is the Rope-A-Dope Radio Podcast. I am your host, Chris Carlson. We're live, per usual, on a Wednesday, 6 on the West, 9 on the East, and 2 UK time. And I'll tell you what, it feels good to say that. Of course, we've been going, on Wednesdays, but generally it's been Thursday mornings. Anyway, hope everybody had a good hump day. I know I did. I was somewhat productive. Also got to sleep in and rest a little bit, and had a little entertainment as well. And boy, do we have a show for you tonight. Obviously, we'll start per usual with recap, right? From a busy, well, I shouldn't say busy weekend. Just like the next weekend, not a ton happening. Now, I know what you're going to say, UK fans. You're like, what are you talking about? This coming weekend is a huge heavyweight fight. No offense. I'm just saying there's not a ton of big fights right now, especially in America. College basketball, March Madness is ruling the day. But either way, we are going to have plenty to talk about. That's for sure. We'll start with recap from Jose Ramirez and Imam's fight, the main event. Spirited fight, good fight, I thought. Thought it was a really good fight. Good performance by both guys, but especially Ramirez, of course. He was victorious. We'll talk a little bit about the undercard, and we'll also talk about what's next for Ramirez. I heard several podcasts and a lot of people, just talking in general about what Ramirez should do next when it's really already on paper anyway, in theory. And as, of course, with boxing, we know a lot of things can be on paper and in theory, and they don't come true, basically. But in theory, there was already plans laid out for two 140-pound fights. So we'll dig into that a little bit more and how Bob Arum looks like he's trying to, maneuver smartly. Let's put it that way. Let's put it nicely. So we'll talk about that. Of course, I'm talking about Ramirez's next fight, but we will recap, the current fight. He looked pretty good. I thought that was his best performance. I think that was, in my mind, his best performance. And then we'll look ahead to this weekend. White against Brown. That kind of sounds weird when I say it that way, and it's kind of funny because it's opposite. Dillian White versus Lucas Brown. Big fight in the UK. Obviously a big fight for both guys at this stage in their career. Both need to keep it going, really. White is trying to get, in that contention to, for Deontay Wilder to become that mandatory. So we'll definitely take a look at that. Also, Golden Boy has two cards coming up this weekend. I think both of them are on ESPN. I don't think it's just, unless one of them's ESPN and one of them's ESPN2. I'll definitely do a little bit more background on that. I forgot they do have one on ESPN. Actually, Ryan Garcia tomorrow night has a fight, a main event card there. Obviously, very hot prospect. Pause. Up and coming prospect from the Golden Boy stable. They're definitely have high hopes for him. He's showing a lot of speed, showing a lot of power. Time will tell, of course, if he's the real deal. So we'll take a look at this weekend. Like I said, not the most eventful weekend, but just around the corner, there's going to be plenty to talk about. That's for sure. And, of course, we're going to go hot and heavy with news. So it'll be recap, a bunch of news stuff. We'll lead with the Canelo Golovkin stuff, and then we'll preview what's coming up this weekend and whatnot. But several fights either being talked about or being made. One of them on HBO, regular HBO. We'll get to that. It's a contender against a champ. I was about to say former champ, but technically he is a champ in Kovalev, so we'll talk about that. Of course, we got to bring up Floyd Mayweather. For the last time we spoke, There was a little detail on him applying for a MMA license to be in the UFC. We'll give you a little bit more detail on that one. Speaking of the UFC, as we know, UFC/Zuffa Boxing is getting into the boxing business. Wait till you hear the rumored offer they have for Anthony Joshua. So really, UFC/Zuffa Boxing, but the UFC in general has two deals on the table for two huge names in the sport of boxing. So we'll take a look at that. We mentioned Pacquiao and Bob Arum having issues. We'll give you a little bit more detail on that. And of course, like I said, we're going to lead with this when it comes to the news. Golovkin throwing shots left and right like it's coming from an AR-15. Okay, is it too soon? I'm sorry. But Golovkin out there saying, listen, they're cheating, period, point blank, talking about injections and pictures of the weigh-in and how doctors were sending him these photos and people sending him these photos and needle marks, injections and all that. So we're gonna detail some of that, no doubt about it. By the way, we're gonna have a little audio clip on Anthony Joshua's response to a Dana White offer. Let's put it that way. We'll have a little audio on that. But yeah, Golovkin even said Oscar's cheating. And it's like, do you mean like he cheated back in his day, or do you mean he's helping Canelo cheat right now, like injecting it? Or do you mean drugs in general? I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't. I'm gonna get. I don't know. I don't know. But we'll talk about a little bit more. You know, here's the thing. No matter what your thoughts on this whole thing, right? Obviously, the failed test, and so you got that part of it. And then what Golovkin coming out saying, and Golovkin, he was even like, and this is where it gets a little lost in translation. And I'm not trying to rip him. The guy knows several different languages, so he's far more in depth when it comes to languages than I in most, right? But of course, some things get lost in translation and what he means or meant to say, just like the Oscar thing, throwing an Oscar, he's cheating too. But he talked about, I eat Mexican food or Mexican meat all the time. Like, what do you mean? You can't, like, Mexican meat doesn't mean taco meat or meat that's in enchiladas, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think he's a little confused right there where you're like, nah, dude, we're not talking. It's not. You don't just go to any old place and get a taco, and it's in the Mexican meat. Like they have a special Mexican meat that gets used in America. It's just kind of random. But like I said, it's probably lost in translation. I think it's just kind of funny. And I say throwing shots, but it's not really throwing shots. It's not really throwing shots. A lot of this is just straight up. Like, come on, like obviously we've heard a variety of things when it comes to this topic, right? When it comes to this PED situation in general. So lots to talk about. Like I said, ton to talk about. But we might as well start with the recap, right? Jose Ramirez, Amir Imam. Ramirez stepping up to his most difficult challenge on paper, and it turned out that way in the ring. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. In fact, I gave Imam the first round. It was fun stuff, though. Really good fight the whole time, I thought. A few right hands landed pretty cleanly for Imam. Some left hooks, which was a consistent punch by Ramirez. He landed some left hooks in that first round, but it was really a nice uppercut that put the icing on the cake for the first round anyway. I'm not trying to get too over dramatic here. But I gave Imam the first round. Next two rounds, I thought Ramirez won them with his pressure in several, okay, that's where it came from, hard right hands. And I thought both of them were jabbing really well. Especially Imam early, it kind of played out where Imam would have a good first 45 seconds or so, first minute, and then slowly but surely Ramirez would just use that busy, steady work throughout and wear him down. The fourth was close though. By this time, Imam was showing good movement, good defense as well. At times when it looked like he was going to be cornered on the ropes, he kind of duck out of it using his jab. So I could see giving the fourth round to Imam as well. But then it seemed like Ramirez started really taking over for me. I gave him the fifth, sixth, in the eighth. The seventh was a close round. But a right hand by Ramirez and then a really good left hook to the body in the fifth got it for me. Ramirez's best, most dominant round up until that point, I thought was the sixth round. Seventh round, like I mentioned, very close. Could have went either way. I think Ramirez landed the harder shots in that round, though. I gave him the eighth as well. There was about, 30 seconds, 45 seconds of just good give and take, though, in that round. A lot of fun stuff. Now, I gave Imam the ninth round. I thought he landed the harder shots. There were a few fun exchanges. And you could see as the fight went on as well, especially in the later rounds, Ramirez was still applying pressure, but he was doing it a little bit more patiently, doing a little bit more responsible. And that's something we're going to need to see out of him as he rises up in competition and possibly his next fight. Like literally his next fight. He's going to have his hands full, potentially. We'll talk more about that in the news. Well, not the news. We'll talk about that next. But it is kind of news, right? Ramirez just 10th and 11th, I thought, just a flurry of solid shots, bloodying up Imam's nose by that time. His eyes started swelling as well, did Amir. Just really taking it to him. Now, I think it was either the 10th or 11th. Let me look at it was the 11th. There was a technical issue, but it was kind of weird because it was like 40 seconds into the round. This commercial went really late, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, what's going on? And then you see it's like 40 seconds of the round. It's really kind of strange. However, what I did see of the round, I saw Ramirez hurt him. It looked like late to the body with a flush left hook, if I'm not mistaken. Left hook to the head and body, actually. And then the 12th round, Ramirez just jumped on him right away. Both guys, landed well for a chunk of the last part, I'd say. Good fight overall, though. Very good fight. I had it 9-3 or 8-4 for Ramirez, one of the two. The scorecard's kind of all over the place. Or not kind of, all over the place. 115, 113, probably a little close, but if I went and watched the fight again, you never know, I guess, right? You never know. Maybe I would give an extra round in there potentially. 117, 111, that's 9-3. I can live with that, but 120 to 108. Really? So in the first, in the fourth, and the seventh, and the ninth, that's just nothing? Imam didn't do anything there? Just 120 to 108. Dude could have just turned his scorecard in and beat the traffic. He should have just, it's New York City. So there's traffic. He could have just beat the traffic, turn his shit in, and be like, hey guys, I'm going to turn my stuff in. I'm going to beat the traffic. All right, you take it easy. I'll see you next time. Ramirez, steady pressure, like I mentioned, threw 799 punches compared to Imam at 653, which is still really busy. 35% to 29% as far as landing. Ramirez in favor there. 282 to 189 and 228 to 108 as far as power punching, non-jabs, all in favor of Jose Ramirez. He fought pretty well, man. I have my reservations at times about Jose on the way up. But, last performance was great, obviously. Those 19 left hooks to the body was pretty fun to watch. No, he literally threw like 8 of them to the body, though, didn't he, when he had him on the rope? Obviously can put butts in the seats in Fresno. they drew a decent crowd. I think it was like, what is it, 5,100 or a little over 5,000 is capacity in that theater at the Madison Square Garden. I believe it was like 4,500 or something like that. Um, of course, it's nice to get into New York and in a new market and whatnot. Obviously, Conlon, Michael Conlon, the uh, the phenom, was really what a lot of Irish supporters were out there, rooting for or whatever. Just real quick, I'll talk about the rest of the card, and then we'll get into Ramirez's next fight. Conlon won really easy, by the way. So we're not going to break that down too much. I'm not big on breaking down one-sided easy fights on a prospect level. I'll just be honest. It just, sometimes you can look so deep into that stuff that you ended up getting kind of misguided when it comes to it. But by the way, Alexander Volchtik took on this, what was it, Amar? Dude's last name was Amar. He was actually a decent vet. Volchtik, it took him a little while to warm up. I thought that actually Amar won a couple rounds. I gave him the second round. What other round did I give him? I gave him a later round, but he was landing flush at times, probably too much. He had a nice counter right hand throughout the fight, but you could start to see third, fourth, fifth round, Volchtik started getting to the body, started getting that busy work going, using his jab as well with the right hand. But kind of throughout, you could see Amar land his right hands, whether they're lead or counter or an exchange or whatever. And I'd say by like the fifth round, you could start to see the toll that the shots that Volchtik was hitting Amar with, they started to take its toll a little bit. Sixth round was probably one of the best two-way rounds of the fight. Seventh round as well, very, very competitive. More right hands in that round. But I thought he just kind of bushed a few couple nice clean shots, especially near the end of that round. Still got him the round. Now, the eighth and ninth, he was taking over, landing combinations. That was his thing. It didn't seem like he could land like too many combinations in a row. Either way, he did end up taking it fairly easy. Scorecards read 118, 110, 117, 111, and 116, 112. At times, Volchtik looked good. Other times, it's got hit, too flush, in my mind anyway. Punch stats, pretty easy. Volchtik was busy, though. I mean, the guy threw 960, 256 out of 960 and 135 for Amar for 536, 29% to 25 in favor of Volchtik. And Volchtik is one of those things where we just got to keep seeing him, in my mind, because there's times right away when people were talking about him, and I checked in on him and was like, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then that Gonzalez fight in and around that time, I thought, wow, okay, I'm starting to see what they're talking about from the nail. But then he has performances like this where you're like, I don't know. I really don't know. I guess maybe the guy's he fights at people's levels. We've seen that plenty. I mean, that's athletes. That's athletes in general. We've seen that, teams, and it's not just in boxing. We see that far too much, really, for my liking. Dropping to other levels rather than just doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? And let everybody catch up to you. But it happens. Maybe that's what it is. But I'm just gonna have to see a little bit more of him. But how much? How much more are we going to see of him until he gets like a really tough fight? So I don't know. It's kind of a wait and see type thing with him. I can see what people are talking about, no doubt, like I mentioned, but also I look and go, Yeah, there's plenty of holes, but I don't know. He's definitely a dark horse. I'd put him. I wouldn't put him in the front, front part of the 175 right now. But that's the beauty about 175. It's got plenty of potential. It's all going to get worked out over the next couple of years. We're going to mention a fight. Speaking of getting worked out, there's a fight coming up in July or June, something like that, on HBO. We'll talk about that at light heavyweight in just a moment. Now, the ratings for this whole show weren't good. They weren't good. I figured it would take a little bit of a hit for two reasons. The obvious reason is, clearly they're going up against March Madness in the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, I get that. You know what I mean? 100%. I totally understand that. You're going to get – it's a lot of competition on, 4 channels at once, just constantly. So I didn't really think there'd be that big of a rating. Of course not. And the other reason is because they didn't have a lead-in. This is the first time in a little while anyway. They didn't even have – they had SportsCenter as a lead-in. And it wasn't like a fresh SportsCenter. It wasn't their highest rated SportsCenter of the day or nothing like that. So, but the rating overall, the whole card did 488. And even some of those prospect mid-level, some of it was just straight mediocre to garbage. Some of it was okay. Some of it was decent. For that second year of the PBC on ESPN, some of them did right around that. So that was a little surprising, especially that it had almost 1.1 from a week ago, and they advertised this fight. So I did think they'd get a little bit better, but I kind of assumed it would be a couple 100,000 more. Let's put it that way. I thought it'd be right around the lowest they've ever had. And it was the lowest ever had, but it was quite low, kind of surprising. And I noticed Dan Raphael, no ratings talk at all this week. When the PBC on Fox goes for, what was it, 890 or 860, a really bad number. And, we talked about Guerrero Figueroa being an action fight, but really no reason it should be a main event, right? He posted those ratings. No ratings post so far, even though it was by far their lowest one. Good fight, though. I'm not saying he needs to post something saying, that was a horrible card, you know what I mean? And the ratings show it. No, nothing like that. Although that's what he'd do for against HBO and PBC, of course. But, a week ago, I really wanted to see how Dan was going to respond to top-ranked fighters and Top Rank in general with this new deal with ESPN. I really wanted to see it. And last week, he had a tweet, and in his article, he basically, or I don't know if it was a full article or one of those quick little blogs that he does, that he'll just post and it'll be on the website, but it's not necessarily in an area that you can always read or whatever. But he said, well, it looks like the people are responding to Oscar Valdez because the ratings were way higher than his last fight, even though they had a huge lead-in. And that's really what was responsible. In fact, the co-feature got higher ratings than the main event. We went over that last week. So it's just kind of funny how he's literally, trying to make it seem even better than it is for Top Rank. And I go back to that B- card that he gave on their first card of the year, which is clearly a trash card. Clearly a trash card. But I told you I wasn't crazy about what they were giving us in February. However, I was all positive for good reason and gave them credit and was very interested in their March schedule. And here we are in their March schedule, back-to-back, very good weekends. So I'm not ripping the fight. I'm just pointing out a fact. Now, a little bit digging deeper into this. Before all the, and we went over this several months ago because it was at the convention when they're, the convention for these sanctioning belts happens a couple times a year. And they announce plans, they announce fights, they announce mandatories, they announce a bunch of stuff. Sometimes they announce, fake PD investigations. So they talk about a bunch of stuff. And as we know, through the sanctioning bodies, and the WBC, I believe in this one, the green belt, right? They had a full championship belt and an interim belt, right? And of course, 140 is going to get figured out just like light heavyweight over the next couple of years. And there's a lot of interest in it all of a sudden because Crawford's gone and now it's wide open. So you're like, okay. And I know Crawford's a little frustrated that a lot of people are talking about 140 now. I get it. But the only reason why we're talking about it is because there's a lot of young fighters, a mixture of veteran fighters, and it's wide open rather than, well, there's nobody here that can challenge you. A lot of these guys are still young, developing at the time when he's in the weight class. But I get it. A lot of talk about 140 now that he's gone, right? But anyway, back to what I was saying. So the WBC said, hey, for the interim belt, the WBC, right, belt, we're going to have Prograis, or Prograis, I keep adding that S, it's just Prograis, Regis Prograis and Victor Postol fight. Now we know Postol pulled out because of an injury, right? In walks in Ndongo and, abruptly taken out in 2 rounds by Prograis. So those two were fighting, and as we know, Ramirez and Imam were called to fight for the real, quote-unquote, belt on the WBC. And by doing this, right, they said, okay, it's basically a 4-man tourney. So we're going to make a real champ. We're going to make a real champion out of the winners. In this case, Ramirez and Prograis, which we know right now is the tough fight for both of them. Obviously. Prograis looks to be a next name, kind of knockout guy, explosive, looks like he's got a lot of skill. Of course, Ramirez is a guy who has that potential to become, a real strong name in the sport. We already know what he's done, with being, an activist in Fresno and just in general, his following there. So it's a big fight to make, but that was the whole agreement. Fast forward to this week and after the fight, and of course you have Bob Arum trying to swindle out of this agreement. Now, I'm not trying to rip Bob. I'd do the same damn thing. Of course. Why wouldn't you? I would too. Basically, what he's kind of talking out of the side of his mouth right now, which he's a promoter. So, I mean, that's what he's supposed to do. But I don't know, man. He's trying to talk out of the side of his mouth. He wants it both ways. So Bob wants Regis Prograis to fight in Fresno this summer, basically at an outdoor stadium, it sounds like, or an outdoor baseball field, I think it is. I'm not sure. And Bob wants him on his undercard. Because he says that way Regis, can be more known. So look he's looking out for Prograis. What a nice guy, Bob. So he wants to promote, even though he has Lou DiBella, and I'm not trying to say, DiBella's better than Bob, but I'm saying he already has a promoter. But he's like, yeah, I really want to promote, get him on a dueling card. We're gonna have him on, co-feature both of them and then fight later this year. And we've seen this plenty of times. This is no new thing, right? But the one thing about this is not a pay-per-view fight. And generally, when we see those, on the co-feature cards, right, where we put them on the same stuff just to put them, a lot of times that's been pay-per-view. But either way, I just think it's not a pay-per-view fight. It's an ESPN fight for the summer. And it kind of lends itself to he doesn't want the fight next and he's going to try to get Prograis beat. So I think they should go right to it. Now that's me speaking as a fan. Easy for me to say, right? But the same card thing, it just feels like the okie doke. Doesn't it? I mean, don't get me wrong. Let's say, before I'd even be good with the co-feature same card stuff, I'd have to see the opponents for both, but especially for Prograis. Because on paper and in theory, he's got a point to an extent, right? He does have a point. But let's put it this way. I mean, if we go down that theory, Ramirez could fight a guy who could move a little bit with some hand speed. Even though Prograis hasn't shown a ton of that. We've seen it in spurts, and he claims he can do it. We'll see if that's true. And on the flip side, Prograis, he could have a come forward fighter come to him, and so he could, kind of get used to that style coming at him, because that's what Ramirez is going to do. Have it in Fresno. People see him on the undercard, go, who's that dude? And maybe, I'm not saying it wouldn't lead to bigger ticket sales, potentially a bigger rating on ESPN. All those things could be true. However, it does sound like the okie doke, doesn't it? I mean, if we're being honest, because even if I say I want to see the matchup, right? That's what I say. And I do. I want to see it. Or the matchups. Of course, we want to see this matchup, but I'm saying overall, I'd like to see who he's talking about them fighting. Would they be completely just no hopers, Or would they really, would it be some decent fighters? I don't know. I really don't know. And it's just dangerous. And even if it was, I'm not going to say a no-hoper, but a guy that you'd favor Prograis in, we know what the cards can do. And if he were to even get a draw, that could screw stuff up. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I really don't know. To me, it really feels like the okie doke. And I get it. You know what I mean? I do get it. I like I mentioned, I totally get it, but I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it, to be honest. I really wouldn't. Because I don't know, man. It just doesn't, it seems like it's not going to happen. And for him to say the first, so you can read Bob pretty easily off his comments if you follow them enough, And to me, it just doesn't ring true. Like, well, nobody knows this guy. Nobody knows this guy. So we really need to get him some pub, you know what I mean? And like I said, it's not a pay-per-view fight. Now, if they did this fight in Fresno, like I mentioned, it would help the sales the second time around. No doubt about it. I agree with that. But I don't. It really looks like he's trying to duck the fight. It really does. And it just so happens that Postal and Progress were fighting for the interim. Now, they can go on their way with that interim, and it still counts probably. But they gave him the quote-unquote real belt. They gave Ramirez and Imam a shot at that. So, I don't know, man. It seems pretty shaky to me. It seems pretty freaking shaky to me, but whatever, we'll see. Like I said, I mean, I don't know, man. I think it's the okie doke. Bob's trying to play the okie doke, and I get it, dude. Progress is quick, heavy-handed, and somewhat skillful. I've seen him counter. I've seen him do what the stuff he says he can do. Now, I don't know if it's true, if he really can, but we'll see. We will see. I don't know, man. It really seems like a stretch to me. But, you know, whatever. It seems like an old school little trick or treat. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, yeah, we're gonna do that fight next. We'll do it next. Not right now. We'll do it next. So that's the scoop on that. On paper, they had a nice little single elimination 4-man tournament with some good fighters. Ramirez, Imam, Postal, and Regis. Good blend of veterans and young guys. That's why I was happy. I was like, hey, man, this works for me. This totally works for me. It makes a lot of sense what they're doing here. You know, it's actually crowning a champ a lot better than the normal way we usually see champs nowadays. I'm not singling out anybody. That's just how it goes, right? So, kind of interesting stuff there. Oh, Bobby. Bobby trying to pull the wool over the eyes of everybody. So, I don't know, man. We should find out somewhat soon on that. So, time will tell. Time will most definitely tell. That's for damn sure, as we know. Oh man, yeah, that's an okie doke if I've ever seen one. That is an okie doke. But anyway, we got some other news to get to. Plenty of stuff still to talk about here, of course. Just making sure my switchboard is good to go. So, you know, we're going to talk about Kovalev's next fight. Really excited about that. Better BF still trying to find a legitimate fight. And another guy just turned him down. We'll talk about that. Of course, we're going to mention Mayweather a little bit. Don't be afraid. Not going to spend a lot of time on it, though. But yeah, his nonsense that he's pulling around with the UFC and whatnot. It's just funny, dude. But you never know. You can't rule this stuff out. Of course, we're going to lead with the Golovkin rant. Golovkin really letting Canelo and Oscar have it, right? I mean, wow. Go, you know, do your thing, man. That's sweet. Good for you. He's not taking no shit. But he is, he might get sued. He might get sued for this, though. I'll say that. Although, I don't know. That's an interesting one. But we'll get into that, some of his quotes and whatnot, and some of the just the funny stuff he's been saying, and he's bringing Oscar into it too. Like Oscar's there, hand in hand, injecting him. By the way, and there's other fight news too. UFC with 2 deals on the table, one for Floyd Mayweather and one for Anthony Joshua. Wait till you hear the numbers. It's pretty interesting. Let's put it that way. Pretty interesting. But yeah, just a bunch of other news. Pacquiao is lawyered up. Well, of course he's lawyered up, but his lawyer has something to say about that Top Rank contract that Bob swears is not expired. Just off, the surface stuff, not knowing the real facts. I'm probably going to side with Bob here in this little situation, but you never know. So yeah, there's a variety of things we're going to talk about. Then, of course, we're going to, look ahead to this weekend. ESPN Golden Boy has some cards coming up. I think 2 of them for sure tomorrow night. Their prospect on the rise, Ryan Garcia. A lot of people had him prospect of the year last year. He's making an appearance on Thursday night. Kind of a rough one. I think Thursday night in the spring and summer works decently for the crowds in the rating, but obviously it's going to be rough, being that it's going to go head to head, with March Madness. But it is what it is. Still, it's a nice little opportunity for him. And I believe they have another show as well. And of course, we're going to preview that Dillian White, Lucas Brown fight, big heavyweight fight on the contender level as far as positioning yourself for mandatory. As we know, it's just a matter of time, as long as White wins anyway. Just a matter of time until, he's going to get called as the mandatory if you look at where the rankings are for Deontay Wilder. But it won't be next, because Wilder, not long ago, 2 fights ago, or I guess you could say a fight ago, took care of his mandatory. Because remember, Stavern somehow, some way, fought somebody in like about a 2.5-year process, and that, that qualified him to be right there in the mix, right? I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? For the man, though, again, of a fight he barely won a round in. Anyway, so yeah, we'll definitely go hot and heavy with news, like I mentioned, and then we'll take a look ahead. I'm also live streaming, like I try to do as much as I can on YouTube right now. By the way, in the description box, there is a live link. There's a link right there, and if you're listening to it not on Wednesday, right, and you're just on YouTube listening to this right now, there's a link for the whole episode. It'll be archived, and it'll be ready for you to go. I'm going to stream until some callers call in, and I'm ready to start taking calls. Then I'll shut it down. But like I said, you can listen to it live by hitting that link, or 646-381-4990 will help you as well. 646-381-4990 is the number to call. If this is your first time listening to the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast, we stream it every single Wednesday. Live stream, and it archives. It's kind of the headquarters there on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. Of course, you can check it out on iTunes, a.k.a. Apple Podcasts. If you rate and review the show there, that's very helpful. Player FM is another great source. We get a lot of listeners from that website. And Spreaker, SoundCloud, Stitcher, whole lot of different places you can listen to the pod. Basically, wherever you listen to pods, there's a good chance that the Rope-A-Dope Radio podcast will be there. We go boxing, but we also have a football and basketball show on the college level and the NBA level, just so you know. We're also part of the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network, okay? And that's boxing, football, basketball, whole lot of different interviews, whole lot of different angles. That's the Grueling Truth Sports Podcast Network. That's available every place I mentioned, right? But it's also available on iHeartRadio. So if you're an iHeartRadio guy or gal, you could check it out. You could also just check out thegruelingtruth.net. That's thegruelingtruth.net. articles and pods right there. They got a great sponsor over there at thegruelingtruth.net, mybookie.ag. That's mybookie.ag. So we're going to dive into a couple of things. I see CT just popped into the switchboard. I'm going to go to him in just a short little bit. But as far as this Canelo stuff, I shouldn't say just Canelo stuff, right? Because obviously it's a little deeper than that. It's a little deeper than that. It's Golovkin really letting them have it, basically. And when I mean them or him, it's Canelo and Oscar. Literally, Oscar. I'm going to read a couple of quotes from BoxingScene.com. This one was posted by Boxing Clever. It's kind of crazy. Golovkin was just on his shit. He actually said those who are responsible, obviously we're talking about the judges here, or one judge in particular, those responsible, well, two actually, but that one really, bird, that horrible scorecard. What was it, 118, 110 for Canelo? So Golovkin is reportedly saying that those responsible for a draw are terrorists. They need to go to jail. He's saying terrorism. That's a little over the top there, Gennady. But I understand your pain. But come on now. Some more. Well, he said basically Canelo's cheating. I could tell they were cheating in the first fight. Abel Sanchez has actually brought up even them trying to cheat when it come. I never heard this until now. No one did that, not many anyway, that they try to cheat on the hand wraps too. But that turned out to be a Nevada commission thing, that they allow certain things like that, a different type of, way to do it, basically wrap your fists. So here's a couple. Golovkin was just sending shots. He's like, he's a cheater. I knew he was cheating in the first one. At the weigh-in, you can even see the needle marks, like on his ab. And I don't really know if you're going to go after your ab and put the needle right in there. And not only that, but, well, I really don't know for a fact, but from what I've seen a little bit and read up a little bit, the thing he got busted for is more like a pill. But I'm sure maybe there's a way you could inject it. I really don't know. I'm not going to act like I do, but. And then he also said, he said stuff like, take a lie detector. Let's see him take a lie detector. And they want more evidence, like, hey, do a background check and some of this stuff, like the restaurants you went to, and maybe we can test some of the meat. And they want more detail, basically. But he's like, basically doctors, people I know, some doctors sent me images, and people compared the images, these little bumps on his stomach, and compared it to Jones. The UFC star who got busted. He had these 3 little dots on his abs too. So I really don't know, man. But he even accused Oscar of cheating. And like I mentioned, I wasn't sure if he was like, he means he's there sticking the syringe in there. But he's saying take a lie detector or, as we know, a hair test. But if we take hair follicles, I want Gennady to take one too then, if we're going there. But here's some other quotes from that same article. I'm a clean athlete. After the first fight, I knew he was not clean. Have a look at the pictures they post when he uses some pill. And that's another thing. Right after the weigh-in, his trainer gives him a pill. And it does look weird the way you do it. Gave him a pill and then he drank some liquid there. And I guess he's saying from like late afternoon or afternoon in Vegas until they test you again right after the fight, that he could quickly get something in and out of his body. I've heard of, 2-3 days. I haven't necessarily heard of 24 hours, even though it'd probably be more than 24 hours technically. So it does look shady, but then again, are they going to do that shadiness right in front of the camera? Camera was right on him. So you gotta ask yourself, are you going to inject right in your abs so it's just plain as day to see? And not only that, is that the best place to inject that stuff? I don't know. I'm just throwing it against the wall and trying to get some logic here. So I'm a little skeptic on that one. But I understand the pills. I think that should be, we should address that. What the hell was that? You don't see that a lot, of course. But you think they're going to cheat right in front of the camera? I don't know. He goes on to say, I don't think I would have had the same amount of benefits as he has as far as the drugs and, the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And this kind of weird that he says this, though. That's why I would never use any drugs, because I know there won't be any preferences to me. And it's like, so that's the reason why you're not doing drugs? So you were doing them or what? I don't. Usually you say I'm a clean fighter and I fight fair and I'm a fair guy. I don't cheat and I got ethics and all, I got a morale, man. I care. I got values. Now he says that's why I would never use. This is his words. That's why I would never use any drugs, because I know I'd get busted and I know I wouldn't get away with it. Okay. That's weird. But he goes on to say, I felt like I won the fight. I thought I didn't understand something, but then I reviewed the fight. These people are like terrorists. They're killing the sport. It's not about me. People like that should be put in prison. People being cheated like that, it's too much. This is America. This is a democracy. Well, Golovkin, when you got a two-party system ran by money, I got news for you, buddy. It's not a democracy. But anyway, and this is what Sanchez said too, and I agree with this. He said, when we go to Vegas, we're 2 points down. And that's true. Now, Gomez on the other side of things, of course, the guy who runs the ship there at Golden Boy, he said it sounds like you're making excuses. Sounds like you're just already making excuses. If you don't want the fight, don't want the fight. A lot of people on Twitter are saying, hey, if you're saying he did it, why are you taking the rematch then? Why don't you just bail from the fight? Well, we know there's a lot of money on the table. That's why he's not bailing from the fight. But he goes on to say stuff like, I mentioned this earlier in the show, he goes on to say things like that the meat contamination, obviously it has to be a trace amount in your system, but to qualify, to even for that contaminated meat from the ranchers and the cattle in Mexico. And this is where I don't know if it's just lost in translation or what, but he's like, I eat Mexican meat all the time. And that's a bunch of bullshit. I eat it all the time. I haven't tested positive for it. It's like, dog, this is where I don't know if he understands what he's saying, because it's like Mexican meat is not anything in a taco or a burrito or an enchilada, all the stereotypical Mexican dishes, right? It doesn't mean if you go get some tacos that it's Mexican meat. It's kind of funny how he's saying that. I eat tacos all the time, dude. Like, he didn't say tacos. I'm paraphrasing there. I'm adding on to it. But he said, I eat Mexican meat all the time. It's like, dog, it doesn't mean it's not like it's in the pico de gallo. You know what I mean? Like, come on. But anyway, lie detector, hair follicles. Hey, if we're going hair follicles, I think Gennady should get involved with that as well. But he says Oscar's cheating too. Now, I don't know if he means drugs or what, but I don't know, man. It's kind of random. Oh, that's funny. But so yeah, that's that. Kind of random. CT, I'm going to get to you in just a moment. I'm going to go over a couple more news items. By the way, Lomachenko and Linares, as we know, got made. We talked about it last week. The tickets are on sale now. It's like 56, 106, 206, 306, 406, and 506. It's at the big room, Madison Square Garden. Tickets on sale now. Go pick it up if you're in the area, or maybe you want to, go there. Speaking of Canelo, there's a little rumor out there that Spike O'Sullivan, the guy who recently missed out on Danny Jacobs' fight, a potential anyway. The rumor is Canelo already has his next fight lined up for September. It's not Billy Joe Saunders, who actually just hurt his hand, and now that fight got pushed back till June, I think June 23rd. That sucks for him. His fight with Martin Murray. But Canelo, there's a strong rumor that says he's fighting Spike O'Sullivan in September, obviously on the Mexican Independence Day weekend, and that's next. It's coming. So Billy Joe Saunders is like hoping that Golovkin wins, obviously, but that's just a little bit of news. Two other items, and then I'm gonna get to CT real quick here. Sergey Kovalev versus Marcus Brown. It's done. It's official. It's just a matter of when. We know where. It's going to be the theater at Madison Square Garden. I believe they're going to try to put Dmitry Bivol on the undercard. But Kovalev and Marcus Brown, June 23rd on HBO or in July. They don't have the exact thing down, but I really like that fight. I'm going to get CT's opinion on that. That's a good fight, man. Really good fight. Marcus Brown a couple years ago had that tough fight with K-Rod. It was his name. And he bounced back really nicely the last couple of fights. So he's built himself back, and he's looking for a big fight. He was lined up for Beterbiev. He decided to take this one. It's probably more money. Plus, Beterbiev is still all tied in litigation. The rumor was he was going to side with Top Rank, but he's still tied up in litigation, so he can't at the moment. Speaking of Beterbiev, though, the IBF, because Brown pulled out of that fight to fight Kovalev, because it's coming for sure, and more money, I'd assume. So the IBF actually replaced Brown with Bramer, right? The guy who actually went down in weight to compete in the World Boxing Super Series. And Bramer turned it down. And when you hear the name that's next, you go, Beterbiev still not able to get a nice fight for him, man. Kind of sucks for him. News items coming up. Pacquiao's lawyer talks about Top Rank. UFC Zuffa Boxing have two offers on the table. One is Zuffa Boxing, kind of a mixture of UFC Zuffa, right? And then one, obviously, we know with Floyd Mayweather, but they have two. They got a deal that they're going to offer Anthony Joshua. It's a big-ass deal. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk a little bit about Mayweather. Not a lot, though, I promise you. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the live YouTube stream. So the people, that have listened there or trying to or going to, go ahead and dial 646-381-4990. You can listen to the live show. Still got plenty left to talk about. I just mentioned some topics. We're also going to, preview what's going on this weekend. Big fight in the UK heavyweight-wise. We're going to hear from the callers and whatnot. And if you're listening to it on Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Sunday or whatever, there's a link right there. You'll listen to the full archived episode. I'm going to shut it down right now, though.